It is difficult to listen to this debate, to hear the arguments peddled by my colleagues that are hypocritical at best and intellectually dishonest at worst.
In order for the Supreme Court to issue a ruling that affects the entire nation, at least 5 justices of the Supreme Court must concur. Yet today, individual district court judges are asserting this authority by themselves. This is an outrageous abuse of public trust and judicial power, and it's opened a Pandora's box that threatens the fundamental constitutional order. The Congress is elected to make law. The President is elected to enforce it. The judiciary is appointed for the sole purpose of resolving cases and controversies brought to it by individual injured parties. Traditionally, that means an injured party seeks redress through his local district court. This simple process assures decisions are limited to the unique circumstances of the individuals involved and are restricted to cases within that district, subject to appeal, first to the circuit court and ultimately to the Supreme Court. This assures that multiple voices contribute to the development of a legal consensus before the matter reaches the Supreme Court. A single district judge seizing this authority for himself utterly short-circuits this process and does incalculable injury to our Constitution.
Where were my colleagues when 14 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents issued injunctions against policies that the Biden administration was pursuing over the course of the last 4 years? Where were you? Nowhere to be found. I don't remember my colleagues bringing this bill to the floor. Of course not.
Madam Speaker, this bill presents a very simple proposition. Should someone who is a guest in this country, who endangers Americans while driving drunk, be allowed to stay in this country? The Republicans say, of course not. And the Democrats say, sure, why not? This ought to be a no-brainer, especially after so many incidents of preventable DUI traffic deaths involving foreign nationals. Mr. Moore and Mr. Carter mentioned a few of the cases of aliens with multiple drunk driving offenses released time and time again and not deported while the butcher's bill steadily grows. Why are such people allowed to remain in our country? Because the Democrats want it that way.
One can only regard with amazement the high indignation which the previous gentleman speaker just mobilized against the Democrats in Congress. He accuses us of not taking DUI seriously, and nothing he said could provide a more striking contrast between the parties. Well, I'm afraid I have to go there. I was hoping not to have to go there. But I seem to remember when we were met in joint session at what would have been a State of the Union address in this year of 2025. And we left the chamber after several years of, several hours of President Trump's speech. And we got outside, and then a car plowed into the back of a parked police cruiser. And the police descend on the situation. The door opens up. The driver staggers out. It turns out it's the chief of staff to Speaker Mike Johnson, who then is administered the breathalyzer test, and he's got DWI. He's driving while drunk, or maybe it's DUI, driving under the influence in the District of Columbia. And Speaker Johnson immediately says everybody deserves a second chance and we should forgive him. So we didn't make a big deal out of that. We've got a law right now which allows for the deportation and the inadmissibility of anybody who goes out and drives drunk and injures somebody. And if you're here unlawfully, you're kicked out anyway. So we're talking about permanent residence to the country. If you go out and you get in a DUI, you injure somebody, you're deported immediately from the country. So now they talk about all those cases. Those cases are already covered. What we're talking about is cases where, say, somebody's not injured at all. There's no property damage at all, and they want to deport those people even if they've got family, they've been in the country for 15 or 20 years. They don't even want to give any discretion to the judge to decide. So that's what the disagreement is about, this very small matter in a small number of cases where nobody is injured. But if the distinguished gentleman and his colleagues are really interested in doing something about drunk driving in America, let's use this as the occasion to do it.
The chairman began by saying the point here is to restore the rule of law.
Restore the rule of law.
Yesterday, President Trump, within hours of returning to the presidency, issued 11 executive orders to once again secure our borders, recover our sovereignty, protect our people, and restore the rule of law. This Congress must not only give President Trump the tools to restore our national sovereignty, but we must also enact laws so that a future Democratic president cannot once again throw our borders wide open.
Can you even pretend to do that if you stand by and support Donald Trump, who on day one, as the chairman of the committee just said, day one of his presidency, pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists, including hundreds of people who violently assaulted and attacked American police officers? Let's just take one person who is free today, Julian Cater, who had been convicted after having every due process protection, the right to counsel, the right to cross-examine witnesses, the right to introduce evidence, but they had him completely. They knew exactly what happened. Most of this was videotaped so the whole world could see it. Well, Julian Cater repeatedly violently assaulted our officer protecting us in Congress, Officer Brian Sicknick, who then proceeded to have several strokes and died on January the 7th, 2021, the next day. The family of Officer Sicknick is absolutely devastated and demolished by what's just happened. I invite any of my colleagues, including the members new to this committee who maybe weren't here on January 6th and didn't experience the trauma of that violent insurrection, when we saw a mob marauding through here yelling, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence," and looking to assassinate Nancy Pelosi. And now you have the temerity to come forward and say this is about public safety? How much safer are we now with these 1,500 criminals at large in Washington, D.C. and going out into the country? Are you vouching that these people are not going to be attacking any other police officers? Are you vouching that they're no longer a threat to public safety? What an outrage. What a scandal.
It is difficult to listen to this debate, to hear the arguments peddled by my colleagues that are hypocritical at best and intellectually dishonest at worst.
In order for the Supreme Court to issue a ruling that affects the entire nation, at least 5 justices of the Supreme Court must concur. Yet today, individual district court judges are asserting this authority by themselves. This is an outrageous abuse of public trust and judicial power, and it's opened a Pandora's box that threatens the fundamental constitutional order. The Congress is elected to make law. The President is elected to enforce it. The judiciary is appointed for the sole purpose of resolving cases and controversies brought to it by individual injured parties. Traditionally, that means an injured party seeks redress through his local district court. This simple process assures decisions are limited to the unique circumstances of the individuals involved and are restricted to cases within that district, subject to appeal, first to the circuit court and ultimately to the Supreme Court. This assures that multiple voices contribute to the development of a legal consensus before the matter reaches the Supreme Court. A single district judge seizing this authority for himself utterly short-circuits this process and does incalculable injury to our Constitution.
Where were my colleagues when 14 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents issued injunctions against policies that the Biden administration was pursuing over the course of the last 4 years? Where were you? Nowhere to be found. I don't remember my colleagues bringing this bill to the floor. Of course not. Spare me your feigned indignation. They talk of defending the Constitution when President Trump is running roughshod over provision after provision. They talk of judicial overreach as they attack judges across the country. Read the Constitution. Read the Federalist Papers. Read about the importance that our framers and founders placed on judicial independence, and reflect on what your conduct will do to the administration of justice in the United States of America, to the rule of law that has been sacrosanct for the better part of 2.5 centuries. I cannot believe, I suppose I should, but I cannot believe that my colleagues would waste time on a bill like this, a dangerous bill, instead of addressing the consequential challenges that our country faces. I would urge every colleague of mine, vote no on this bill.
Is it your position that what happened on January 6th was not an affront to our Constitution?
On the contrary, I think it was a terrible affront. I've called it an abomination. It disrupted one of the most important constitutional functions of our government, and we should not tolerate that. And the people that were responsible for assaulting our officers, the people who were responsible for vandalizing this sacred building, should have the book thrown at them. I've said that all along, and I think it was a mistake for the president not to differentiate between those people and the vast majority of people who, as I said, broke nothing, hurt nobody, and simply thought they were exercising their First Amendment rights.
So given that, why object to a simple amendment that simply seeks to probe, as an oversight matter, the very thing that you purport to disagree with? I mean, your point, right? You've called President Trump's pardon.
Yes, well, that is, but the pardon is.
I would hope you would support this particular amendment if that were the case.
The pardon is the exclusive prerogative of the executive under our Constitution.
I see. Well,
and I do believe in that separation of powers.
I would simply say, Mr. McClintock, again, I have great respect for you, but I don't know how you can make that argument in a straightforward way to make the case that you disagree with these pardons and you believe that they shouldn't have been granted, but you object to a mere investigation or any kind of oversight by this particular
We have no authority to investigate the exclusive prerogative of the executive.
Right. Well, let me in a moment, Mr. Chairman. But I'm enjoying my colloquy with Mr. McClintock. Would you describe what happened on January 6th, Mr. McClintock, as an attack on our Capitol?
I would describe it as a riot.
As a riot. Okay. I'm going to read to you a tweet, or an X, whatever they call it these days, from January 6th, 2021, at 4 p.m. Quote, "The attack on the Capitol strikes at the most sacred act of our democracy, the peaceful transfer of power. It is an outrage and a threat to our most fundamental principles as a free people." That's from your Twitter account.
Yeah, I don't gainsay a word of that.
On January 6th. Well, you called it a riot. You denied it was an attack a few moments ago. These are your words, or at least whoever posted these from your account 4 years ago, in the throes of that particular day when we were all on the floor, as Mr.
I was outraged from it, and I'm still outraged by the people who broke our laws, who were violent, who vandalized our building. But we have to recognize that that was a relatively small group compared with a large number of people who came here simply thinking that they were exercising their right to protest.
Well, let me just distinguish this point, because again, that sounds very different than the way in which many members have characterized January 6th in the past. You're making this distinction with respect to individuals who committed violence or didn't commit violence. I'll read you another statement. "What happened here on January 6th was an affront to our Constitution and national disgrace. Those who entered the Capitol with the intent to disrupt the counting of electoral votes deserve to be denounced by their fellow citizens and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law."
Exactly.
That's yours. Well, that sounds very different than what you just said, that there were a couple of violent people.
No,
but the vast majority, well, hold on, Mr.
those who
McClintock.
broke into the chambers of the House, those who came here intending to disrupt our proceedings, I have no sympathy for.
Well,
but I don't think that describes the vast majority of the people who entered the building.
Belongs to the gentleman from Colorado.
I thank the chairman. The vast majority of those individuals, again, the broad way in which you framed it in your statement in July of 2022, a year later, that any individual who disrupted the proceedings or attempted to disrupt
who intended to disrupt them, yes.
the electoral accounting procedures ought to be fully prosecuted under the law.
And I still believe that.
Well,
and I believe that the
sounds very
pardons
different.
of those people
Sounds
were
very
a
different than what you're
mistake.
saying today, Mr. McClintock. I yield back. I know.